Welcome to Writings, Chats, and Friends. If this is your first time here, my name's Monica Brinkman, and I will be co-hosting the show along with my wonderful friend and co-host, Kenneth Weene. Hi, Ken.
Hi, Monica.
You know, Ken, we were talking, a friend of mine the other day, and they don't understand how writers get ideas, where they come from, how we feel their emotions, that type of thing. So I thought maybe we would talk a little bit about that.
Okay. The Muses.
The Muses, because some people don't even think they exist.
Well, when I read a bad book, I'm pretty sure that the person who wrote it didn't have a muse. I think that's the difference actually between good writing and bad writing, is the existence of a muse. Now, you know, the muses the idea originally were these mystical kind of creatures, the Greeks, you know, the goddesses who played lyres and, you know, kind of inspired.
Yeah, it goes back a long way, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, I go back a long way.
not all the way to the Romans.
but I think that all of us have different, not only different muses, but different channels by which muses reach us. Sometimes our muses are real people. For example, I've written some fairly good, I think, short stories about military events, particularly in Vietnam, some poetry, etc. Now, all of those the muses have been real people.
So you based it on that?
Well, not necessarily. That's the thing. Okay. Like, I have one where it's about growing up, playing childhood games, and then going off and ending up in Vietnam. And it came as a result of talking to somebody who had been in Vietnam, but his only experience in it, okay, is in the middle of the story when they kind of land and go in, and the lieutenant, they're supposed to be in kind of this surprise mission, and the lieutenant is calling in artillery. And, you know, there goes the surprise. But that's just, talking to this guy just awakened in me a story. And then it kind of goes and grows from there. So sometimes it's a real person. Sometimes it's not even a person, to be honest. Sometimes the muse for me is music. Mm-hmm. I'll be sitting, listening to music. And my propensity is primarily to listen to classical, but also I sometimes listen to music from other cultures. And I was actually at the time listening to some Pashtun music. Now, the Pashtun are the plurality population of Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. And then there are almost twice as many Pashtun across the border in Pakistan. Mm-hmm. And the Taliban are, well, this is a whole other political thing, but the Taliban are really a Pashtun nationalist organization.
I see. And a lot of people don't realize that, I'm sure.
Well, actually, I was recently asked to write a short position paper, supposedly with somebody in the FBI. Whether or not they're actually going to read it, or, you know, what'll happen, I don't know. It's still out there.
Where are you getting your ideas for that?
Oh, well, that's a whole other story. Let's go back to my listening to Pashtun music for a minute. And I wrote it. I ended up, as I'm sitting there, and I'm just sitting, kind of closing my eyes, thinking about this music, which, by the way, is very much like Greek music.
Oh, okay.
The Pashtun are actually descendants of Alexander the Great's army. That's part of their foundation myth. Well, anyway, I'm sitting there listening to this wonderful instrumental music, and all of a sudden I see this little girl, this young, you know, she's like 11 years old, and she's carrying water. in a jar on her shoulder from a well. And all of a sudden, the story forms. It's just a piece of flash fiction. Well, the muse is the interaction with something stimulating my thought. Sometimes it's actually just a voice in my head. My novel, Red and White, actually was a story told to me, a story with stories in it that was told to me by a voice, a real voice in my head. I'm sitting there typing down the words as this voice is
they're coming to you. Yeah.
I mean,
I read that book, Ken, and it is so authentic. Yeah. And that's what struck me about it.
Well, okay. Then the funniest thing about it is actually, the voice has given me a name for himself. And I do the entire book writing about with this guy. He's not a central character. He's not a central character, but he's the voice. And then I get to the end where he becomes, it really becomes definitive, just at the ending of the book. Mm-hmm. And now then he says to me, and remember, I'm hearing a voice. Yeah. I've lied to you. He says, this is not my name. He says, my real name, that people call me, was Plenty Horses. He says, I did not tell you my name so you could not look me up and get caught up in my story, because I wanted to tell you the story of Lonely Cricket. But now, so you understand why I have told you this story and what it is about, why it ends this way, look me up. And
Did you?
Oh, yes. And he is the only person who could have been this character.
Wow.
Okay. It turns out he was at the places that this story turns at times when he had to be there. And he has told me, now, do I consider this a voice from the gods? What I will say, absolutely, I was never a Native American. No, not in a previous life. But I have had Native Americans read it, and they have said to me, as you did, that it's so authentic.
Oh, yeah. I was amazed. I mean, I'm a fan of your writing, Ken.
Thank you.
But I was amazed with this. Everybody needs to read it.
So what do your muses come from?
I have dreams more than anything.
Uh-huh.
I mean, they're whole novels.
Uh-huh.
And I'll have the dream more than one time. So I know when that starts happening that somebody's trying to tell me something. Mm-hmm. And I think writers need to listen to these things. Don't think you're crazy,
Oh, whoa. Of course we're crazy.
I'm crazy to be writers in the first place.
Yeah, look, let's be real here, folks. With a very small number of exceptions, if you want to write, and you should if you want, please do, pick that down. Understand something. You're engaging in something that is time-consuming, heartbreaking, difficult, bang your head against the wall, frustrating, and all for a return significantly less than you could make if you were cooking French fries at a McDonald's.
Yeah.
Part-time, because you kind of, I mean.
Well, the thing about the Muses is my end nag until you do something about it. Mm-hmm. It's not like they just go away.
Well, one of the things I found is that they don't go away, but what they will do is they'll go on sabbatical. If you're not able to finish a book, that doesn't mean that you should give up the book. Mm-hmm. It means you should store the file and wait for the next book. And one of my best books is something called Broody New Englander, and it's got 3 parts to it. Well, the first part, which is a novella called The Starlight, I got about, I would say, a third of the way through, and blocked, just blocked. I then wrote another book, Tales from the Doodle Bin. And of course, there are other things like short stories and poems all being generated at this time too. And then I told my wife I really wanted to go to the Writers Colony in Deary Hollow, which is in Eureka Springs, Arkansas. Wonderful place. And so I went away for a couple of weeks to work on this book. And I guess that it told the Muse that I was ready to go forward. And I get there, and the first night, you mentioned dreams, the first night I feel the bed shaking, and I wake up, and presumably in a dream state, not a REM state. I look up, and there is a character from the book. And she is standing there, and she says very clearly to me, "What makes you think it's his child?" That's what I've been hung up on. I've been writing this book in which there was the main character, one of the main characters is, he's got a kid, his wife, and, it's all centered around them. And it's just stuck there, and it's spinning my wheels. It's beautifully written stuff, but it's spinning and spinning and spinning. And my wife has now told me she cheated on him. And I sat down, I got up, went into the other room. The way they do it there, they had given me a writing studio with a bedroom and bath, really great facility.
Nice setup, yeah.
To the studio, and I started. I didn't stop. The next morning, come breakfast time, I took a break to get a cup of coffee and a donut, went back, and the Starlight was written almost nonstop after that. And it's absolutely one of my favorite things I've ever written. It's written there is a book within it which is written in prose, but the major part of the book is written in poetry. It's iambic, pentahead, it's just this beautiful writing. It's something that I pride myself on, but it's not particularly my style to write this verse prose. And I know that this muse just was guiding me through it just as surely as Bloody Horses had guided me through Red and White. So
what I found interesting, my dreams, or what I hear, from the Muse, they tend to want me to write horror in everything I do. And I don't know why.
I've noticed that when I've read your books. And by the way, folks, Monica writes a very good book. And a couple of them are about karma and, how the world turns on karma. And yeah, there is this horrific quality to what happens to people, deserved horrific.
And, I never said, oh, I love horror best, so I'll just write about that. I think people need to open up themselves to listen to these things. They might say, oh, you guys sound crazy. Well, if it's crazy, then a lot of authors and writers throughout the history are all crazy. Because it happens. Yeah. Where do ideas come from, right? Where do new things come from?
Yeah. Your horror, I find, comes a lot more of your horror is, physically, mentally painful horror. In my horror, it's interesting because my horror is a more, it's more about terror than horror.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, in fact, I have one little ebook.
Right. Yeah.
I think being a shrink has made me more geared to the terror the horror we create inside of us, and yours is more the horror of the outside world. And you're much more aware. I remember you were very sensitive to people who have like a skin disorder, and they're just in torment, physical torment. And I guess in a sense that you knew somebody, didn't you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Actually, my niece was born with that.
Yeah.
And that was one time I didn't really have any muse of any type. It was a personal experience I drew on. So we do that also, don't we, Ken?
But wasn't your niece also a muse in a sense?
Well, I guess so, if you put it that way. Yeah.
I mean, my books, I start with people that I know sometimes. Times to Try the Soul of Man, which takes place in New York before, in the years leading up to 9/11, and it's a crime. And it's based, the reporter, who is the principal character, is to this day still a friend of mine, a very good friend. Of course, I fictionalize him some, but most of the story is based actually on his personal experience. And by the way, the person who was murdered in the story, the victim of the murder, is somebody that I met. He was the director of the Hispanic Community Center in Alphabet City in New York, and I had met him because he was very active in bringing creative arts into that community center, and my wife and I had attended some events there. So I had met him. I didn't know him.
Met him. Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting. I guess writers, when they want to, if a brand new writer, somebody says, okay, I want to write stories, I've got some ideas, do you think they should do things like meditate a little bit?
Some of my meditate, yes. The short story, yes. Long answer. You think about what meditation works for you. Okay. The other day I was on Facebook and somebody read something about poetry, and I wrote about how I use poetry as meditation. Okay, that I read poetry aloud. I write poetry and read my poetry aloud to concentrate on my breath, which is a big part of poetry, of meditation. I read other people's poetry to allow the idea of other ideas and visions to enter my head, which is another part of meditation. I've already mentioned listening to music. Meditating, and again, very often I will listen, if I can, to music from other cultures, especially the very rhythmic. I mentioned the Pashtun music, which is very rhythmic. I listen to Qawwali, which is actually Pakistani religious music, which is very waily. I listen.
I think we should take a break right now, because I want to show people what can come of being alert, looking for signs, taking in whatever comes to you. So we're going to give them an idea. Folks, we'll be back right after this.
Red and White by Kenneth Weene. During the years after the Civil War, Lonely Cricket, a Native American boy, strives to learn his people's ways and traditions and to grow to manhood. This is a difficult task for any youngster, but Lonely Cricket is coming of age in a world that is changing, one in which Euro-Americans are determined to change Indians into reflections of the white world. Caught between the tales and traditions of his tribe and the ever-encroaching world of the white man, Lonely Cricket must figure out how to live, whom to love, and most difficult of all, who he really is. As Lonely Cricket battles to find himself, the twists and turns of his story reveal more about his background than he ever expected to know.
Hi, folks. Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that short break. And now, let's talking a little bit more about what do you do to meditate, Monica?
I like to meditate in nature more than anywhere else. You know, I've tried it inside my house with music playing or without music playing and all, but I find that I get a much better connection when I'm out among nature.
Okay.
And when you meditate as a writer, there's going to be things that come up and you're wondering why they're coming up. I mean, I've had voices, a face come up just yelling at me, telling me that I have to say this, talk about this. If I hadn't meditated, I don't know how long it would have taken me to get a connection with that.
Mm-hmm. Do you find that your artwork, I know you paint and draw, do you find that as a way of meditating?
Ken, it's crazy. It's just like when you were talking about how you sit down and just type. That's how I write. Somebody else is actually doing this, putting the ideas in there. Same with art. I'll look at something, I'll go, I can never do this. You know, doubting myself, blah, blah, blah. But doggone it, I set it up, I start doing it. It's like something else takes over you. Mm-hmm. If that makes any sense.
Oh,
it's like actually 4 or 5 hours will go by.
Yeah.
You know, writing or doing art, and you didn't even know it because you've been so intent. And I think that's something that people have to understand. Get rid of all the noise, all that stuff around you, so you can make pure connections with ideas, muses, whatever comes up. Because you don't want to write the same old story everybody else has written 100 times.
Well, you know, I want to respond to that because I don't want to discourage people. There are people who write fan fiction. There are people who write genre. Sometimes people write genre and they're really creative, but you know, there are only so many ways to kill a zombie, as it were.
Yes.
And I don't want to discourage people from writing those things.
No.
You should write what you enjoy, but I think what Monica is saying, if you really, really want to be creative, then you have to allow your brain to go to some other place. And sometimes you'll find yourself kind of asking weird questions in that other place because you don't know everything. I mean, we don't know everything. We know more than we realize we know a lot of the time. But sometimes we have to let ourselves hear the questions. And then we can come out of that trance state, if you will, and look for an answer. Maybe there is an answer. Maybe there is something that we need to add to what we're writing, you know, and that's when you go to say your thesaurus to get another word, or that's when you go online to look at the different types of carriage or the different types of automobile or you know, whatever it is you're trying to describe. Those are the moments, but if you get hung up in worrying about that factual stuff, which I think is kind of part of the noise, it interferes with the real writing. So one of the things I would say is if you're in that state where you're writing and you don't know what to call that carriage or what to color that horse is, or you know, what that chemical is that boosts that rocket, you know, what the name of that weapon is that kills that they were using, you know, just let it go, leave it blank. Keep writing.
100%.
Keep writing, and then go back. And I mean, everybody knows the first thing about writing is you get words on paper. Well, of course, we get them on screen now, but same idea. And then the next part is supposedly editing. But there's a third part, which is filling in those blanks and, you know, making those corrections. That's a kind of editing too, but that's a different kind of editing.
Yes.
So let's talk about the muse of editing, because that's another muse. That's a different. That's the real shitty muse, the one that keeps kicking you in the rump. How do you go about editing?
Editing takes me quite a while, actually. I don't have a program like I don't use any of these programs that a lot of authors use. I'm not saying they're bad. I just don't use them. So I have to read it and read it and read it and read it. And what most of my editing is, Ken, is taking out those unnecessary words. Like there's some people that want to go on and on and on and on with adjective after adjective, and it's like I got it the first time, you know.
Okay. I'm going to. I agree with you, but okay, getting rid of words. I don't believe in most of those programs because actually I think all they do is correct grammar, and if you don't know the rules of grammar well enough to know when you're breaking them and why you're breaking them, then probably you should go back and, you know, study more grammar. But when we write, it's not about I mean, that page editing, that's something you want you publish it to maybe help with and stuff. But we're talking about the main editing, the idea.
Editing, yes.
My secret at editing is I read out loud.
I think that's a wonderful idea.
I think the worst thing that ever was done to me, I was a very early reader. That's a whole other story. I started reading quite young. Mm. And the school, they would tell me, don't read out loud. Again, other people are reading, don't read out loud, you know, read to silent, you know.
Yeah, we were all taught that, yeah.
Which makes sense. But it also is terribly destructive because language is oral. It isn't, you know, internal. We do talk to ourselves, but even when we talk to ourselves, like we said, we don't, when I'm talking to myself, they're voices, I'm hearing voices. I'm not thinking abstract words. Mm-hmm. So I want to hear my words as the reader, as I want the reader to hear them.
You brought up something very important right there. Even though I don't do it out loud when I read, I'm reading as if I didn't write this. I just picked this up. Mm-hmm. Do I want to buy this story? And the truth is, before you do your first edit, hell no, you don't want to buy this story. You know?
Yeah, I mean, that's part of it.
You know what I mean? You've got to fix these things.
When you start reading something and you want to be attracted into it, but I'm not quite like James Joyce, and it isn't going to take me years and years to finish Ulysses. but I am, you know, somebody who wants the words to sound right. I want the flow. I want each character's voice to be unique. I want my narrator's voice to be unique. I don't want grammatic perfection. I want linguistic perfection.
Which makes sense. I don't know, editing is such a hard thing. Do you ever have anyone else look at your work, your script?
My writing?
Yeah, your manuscript.
First thing is my wife reads almost everything I write.
See, that's great that you have someone that.
And she gives, by the way, she's a wonderful grammar editor, so she gives me a lot of the grammatical correction, which, you know, since I am a, you know, I know my grammar, but still I make mistakes. She catches a lot of that for me, but she also catches the voice and stuff. Then now I only belong to a poetry group online, But back in the day, I used to belong to a writing group. I'd love to belong to another writing group if I could find one.
It's a little hard to do with all this pandemic and everything.
And then I have editors. Over the years, I've had a few editors, and I would pay them to read and edit. And then, of course, most of my work is published by All Things That Matter Press, which publishes a few years.
I just love them.
Yeah. And of course, they edit. So by the time my stuff is out there in print, and there's still errors, there's still
oh, the most well-known authors have errors.
But it has been edited, everything's been edited and read, yeah. And then, although I don't usually use beta readers, sometimes I do. Like in Red and White, I used beta readers because I was very concerned about the authentic voice. And actually, one of the beta readers was very, very helpful in a way that I didn't expect. I had used the same description of a sound a few times. And he said, come on, you can do better than that. You use this. Yeah.
It's something you wouldn't even realize. Huh?
Yeah, because they were far apart. But for him, they stood out, which is another thing. Which is, a beta reader will sometimes lock on something just idiosyncratically, and then it can be helpful. So, but when you have that kind of process of repeated editing and repeated reading, I do think it makes a better book. Now,
no, it does.
Some of the really great writers, like Joyce, they edited themselves that way.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, editing, it's really easy to say that the process of writing is you start out in the morning, putting 100 words on paper, and spending the afternoon removing 99 of them.
It's true, though.
And sometimes I see online, especially on like Facebook, I'll see people have talked about, I wrote 10,000 words this weekend.
Yeah.
And I say to myself, maybe you had a muse guiding you, because as I mentioned, writing the stylight, it flowed that way. And, I had to change very little, and my editor was just, oh my God, this is brilliant. But other than those moments when you have a muse writing it for you, I'm sorry, you can't write 10,000 words in a weekend and have it be good. Maybe there are people who can, but most of us can't. It is, if I write 10 words in an hour sometimes, I look at myself, I pat myself on the back. And then the fact is that if I'm writing poetry, particularly, or short stories, I go back and I edit. So let's say I wrote.
I do that with short stories, flash fiction too.
Yeah. Let's say I wrote a 2,000 word short story in one go over the weekend. Let's say I did that, and which is for me would be a phenomenal amount. I would not say I wrote 2,000 words over the weekend, because I know that I would take at least another week before I would say it was finished.
Mm-hmm.
So that first spewing out of words isn't what I've written.
That's just getting ideas on paper.
Yeah.
It's getting it on the paper so you can go back to it.
Yeah.
There might be somebody out there who can just write and never have to edit, but that would, that's few and far between, if any.
Oh, yeah. I just was looking today at a short story I wrote some time back. And that I was thinking about maybe making a video of. If people go and follow me on YouTube, mm-hmm. besides finding the show,
right,
they'll also find that, I have a YouTube channel. And, one of the things I do is I like to share some of my short fiction in video form with some pictures to help.
And so, that's a good idea and resource for new authors also.
Yeah. So I just was pulled up this short story that I wrote a couple of years ago to look at and think about. And it's funny because I'm going to read you the first paragraph, okay? And then I'll tell you why.
All right.
We played hide and seek, flashlight tag, steal the flag, all those childhood games, warfare on playgrounds, but with freedom, even rebirth, only a ring alivio shout away. Bang, bang, you're dead. I shot you first. King of the mountain, push, shove, tumble. Okay. And that's the beginning of the short story. Now, before I tell you where it goes and why I wrote, I remember writing that beginning. I remember writing that beginning. I wrote it, then I wrote it, then I wrote it, and 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 wrote it, and edited, removed. And I remembered that process that day. And I started at about 9:30 in the morning. And when my wife called me at lunchtime, I told her, I can't write now, I'm writing. And at that point, I was on like the 20th rewrite. And I remember saying, oh, flashlight tag.
That's exactly what you needed, huh? Yeah.
For that
Isn't it? And you have to, but you took time to be open to ideas.
Mm-hmm.
If you think you already know them all already, they're not going to come.
And then I'm going to read to you just so you understand where this went and why it was so powerful. This ended up being a story about Vietnam.
Okay.
And it had been influenced by this is the one I had talked about earlier.
Yeah.
It started by the fellow who had told me about this lieutenant. Okay, and this is the ending of the story. They are now in a village in Vietnam, and somewhere in a cave, dug deep into the damp ground, the people were hiding. Good judgment. Hide and seek and survival. 10, 12, 13, I couldn't tell. Why wasn't he in that tunnel with the rest? Left behind by accident? Wanting to prove he was tough? Maybe there was a doe-eyed Sally, and he wanted her to know. I gestured with my rifle. He stood, his hands raised. A kid, surrendering. A kid, scared and trying to look defiant. Bang, bang, you're dead, I thought. And then he was.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, and that's the true reality of it.
Yeah. And
You
again,
captured that perfectly.
yeah, and then again, you know, the mirroring the same age as when the narrator is first playing these games, but you know, the shaping words, you know, and I remember writing this story, and this story took weeks. It's a total of about 1,500 words, a story, and it took me 3-4 weeks to write. So when people tell me they wrote 10,000 words last week, yeah. Did you copy the dictionary? Maybe.
Well, my whole thing about, you know, people always, oh, I did this many words each day. I'm not going to write unless it comes to me. I can't sit down and force myself to write a story.
And that's to me is the real danger of genre writing and fan fiction writing, is that when people write genre, when people are writing zombie and things like that, that it becomes so formulaic that you can write 10,000 words. And to me, you know, I want, you know, the romance novels. Now, I love romance. I love the idea of falling in love. I mean, I've been married for over 50 years to a woman I am totally still in love with.
Yes.
Great believer in romance and love. But, you know, I don't want to read formulaic love. I want to read love about love that makes me more, that makes me more than I already am. And that means love has to be more than just, you know, kitschy coochie goo.
Yeah. No, that's true. I mean, and the thing is, ever since I was young and saw, you know, the romance novels, they're basically all the same story.
Right. Yeah.
Just different characters, different scenes. I'm not putting these authors down. There is a place for that. There's people who want to read those.
Yeah.
That's just not me as an author. I want to bring something new. I want to make you think. I want you to talk about the book afterwards, right?
Well, to me, it's not writing in the same as an art. To me, it is writing as a craft, or maybe that's the wrong word, but you know, when you do that kind of formulaic writing, it's like when I go to the spring fair and the fall fair or something, and I see that somebody has done coasters, and there are all these lovely mosaic coasters. I might even buy one. I might say, gee, that'll go nice on such and such table, and, you know, keep reading off it. But I don't see it as a work of art. When I'm looking for a work of art, I'm looking for something that it's the only one.
Yeah.
It's going to make me react differently. And
Same with writing. Same with the story.
Yeah, to me, I'm looking for, when I look at a romance or even a zombie, I mean, I want it to make me think about the world differently, not just reconfirm what I've already thought.
Yes. No, and understand. I hope that people understand what a muse is and how to attract them, I guess. Mm-hmm. How to get in touch with them, because I really think they're there already.
Well, if nothing else, folks, just always remember, you want to be amused by your muse.
And with that, Ken, I think we're going to say goodbye. We got one quick little thing to show you. Folks, I hope you enjoyed the show, and I hope it helped many new authors. Here you go, Ken. Take care.